The storm battered the city like a living thing, its howls clawing at windows and tearing through the streets with relentless fury. Inside the Brightway Mart, the flickering neon sign buzzed like an insect trapped in glass, casting erratic, jagged shadows over the linoleum floor. Mark yawned, the hum of the fluorescent lights pressing down on his exhausted mind. The door creaked open, and a man stepped in. He looked as though the storm had spat him out. His soaked coat clung to his gaunt frame, water pooling around his worn boots. His hollow eyes darted nervously, never settling. "A lottery ticket," he muttered, voice cracking as he handed over crumpled bills. Mark slid the ticket across the counter, watching as the man stared at it for a long, unsettling moment. Then, with a dry, mirthless chuckle, the man turned and shuffled back into the storm. "You never know," he said, the words trailing behind him as the door slammed shut. Mark called after him, but the man vanished, his silhouette dissolving into the rain. The neon sign sputtered and dimmed, and for a brief moment, the store was plunged into an unnatural silence. When the lights returned, the ticket lay abandoned on the counter. For 3 days, the ticket lingered beneath the register, a silent weight pressing on Mark's thoughts. When the winning numbers were announced, his heart thundered in his chest. Every digit matched. At home, the ticket lay in his trembling hands, its glossy surface gleaming under the faint light of his desk lamp. It felt heavier than paper should, cold against his skin. "This is fate," he whispered, though the word twisted in his chest, heavy and cold, like a stone plunging into black water. He pictured the life it promised. Freedom, escape, a chance to start over. The man's hollow eyes flashed in his mind, but Mark shoved the thought away. The next day, he stood before the lottery commission, claiming the prize with a shaky smile. The Bright Futures Foundation became a symbol of hope. Clean water flowed into remote villages, schools rose in forgotten towns, and hospitals saved countless lives. Mark's name graced headlines as a savior. But in the quiet of his sprawling estate, shadows seemed to stretch farther, darker. The house was too still, the silence too complete. At night, it felt alive. Floorboards creaked with soft, deliberate steps that always stopped just as Mark held his breath to listen. Sometimes the sound seemed faint, as though carried from far away, leading him back to where it all began. Rain lashed against the windows, the sound mingling with phantom laughter, a brittle, hollow sound eerily similar to "You Never Know." Mark began avoiding his own reflection, unable to shake the feeling that the man's hollow eyes stared back at him through the mirror. Shadows that once offered comfort now seemed alive, stretching toward him like accusing fingers. He avoided sleep, throwing himself into his work. But the harder he tried to drown his guilt with good deeds, the more it grew, an unrelenting tide. At the foundation, Mark noticed the tension among his staff. On stormy days, they glanced over their shoulders more often, their conversations hushed. One day, a receptionist swore she saw the outline of a man in the reflection of the glass doors, standing motionless in the rain. But when she turned, the hallway was empty, the only sound the faint drip of water on the tiled floor. One rainy night, a janitor swore he saw a figure standing by the office window. When he turned on the light, it was gone, but the glass was streaked with what looked like handprints. One evening, Mark scrolled through his phone, his mind numbed by exhaustion. A video stopped him cold. On the screen, a gaunt, weathered man sat on a crumbling sidewalk. Shadows twisted unnaturally around him, the light shifting as though avoiding him. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried an edge sharp enough to slice through Mark's thoughts. "I bought a lottery ticket once," the man said, staring into the camera. "It was my ticket out, but I lost it, left it somewhere, just disappeared." The camera shifted slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Mark swore he caught a glimpse of his own reflection in the storefront glass behind the man. He blinked, but the moment lingered, a cold knot tightening in his chest. "You never know how much one mistake can cost you," the man finished, his hollow eyes locking onto the screen as if looking directly at Mark. Mark's stomach twisted. His phone slipped from his hand, shattering on the tile floor. That night, the emails began. The first was simple. "We know what you did." The next included a photograph, a grainy Polaroid of the lottery ticket, its numbers circled in red. The photograph was grainy, but the man's outline seemed unnaturally sharp, as though he didn't belong in the frame. The numbers circled in red pulsed faintly, casting a faint crimson hue on Mark's trembling fingers. The edges of the Polaroid felt oddly warm, as though it had absorbed something that shouldn't have existed. The creaking in his house grew louder that night, the phantom footsteps seeming to come from the direction of the Brightway Mart, as though calling him back to where it all began. A package arrived without warning. Inside was another Polaroid. The man at the Brightway Mart counter, his back turned. On the back, written in jagged letters, were the words, "Fate always collects its debts." Mark found Eric Gibbons in a shelter, a shadow of the man he had once been. Their meeting took place in a dim, windowless room, the air thick with unspoken tension. Eric's voice was calm, but each word was a dagger. "Do you know what it's like to lose everything? To watch one stupid mistake destroy your life?" Mark's hand shook. I tried to make it right. I used the money to—" "You can't buy forgiveness," Eric interrupted, his tone colder than the room. "Not with money, not with charity, and you certainly can't buy it from me." Eric's shadow stretched impossibly long, twisting and flickering like a broken film reel. For a moment, it seemed to rise from the ground, looming over Mark like a specter. The air in the room grew colder, heavy with a stillness that felt alive. "Fate always collects, Mark," Eric said, his shadow flickering like a dying flame. "And when it does, it doesn't leave change." The words lingered in the cold air, heavier than the silence that followed. Years later, the Bright Futures Foundation thrived, but Mark had faded into obscurity. One stormy night, he found himself at the Brightway Mart, drawn back by a pull he couldn't resist. Rain lashed against the windows and the neon sign buzzed erratically. As he stood at the counter, a figure appeared outside, silhouetted against the storm. The air inside the mart grew dense, heavy with the scent of damp earth and ozone. The figure outside was impossibly still, its outline blurred by the rain but solid in a way that made Mark's breath catch. The neon sign buzzed louder, its light dimming as the door chimed open. The air turned icy, the cold seeping into Mark's bones. "You never know," the figure said, its voice cold and hollow. The lights flickered, and when they steadied, Mark was alone. The foundation continued its work, but Mark's paranoia never left him. Every shadow seemed to lengthen in his presence. Every gust of wind carried a whisper. "You never know." Sometimes the foundation staff would whisper about the shadowy figure seen lingering near the office windows on rainy nights. Mark said nothing, but the whispers always carried the same words. "You never know." the words wrapped around him like a damp shroud, soft and cold, until he could no longer tell whether the whispers came from the world or from inside his own mind.
The Life of Raymond, a legacy of hard work and kindness. Raymond Fletcher was the kind of man people admired. He'd spent his entire life working hard, taking pride in the fact that every penny he earned was the result of his dedication. Born in a small town, Raymond's family wasn't wealthy, but they instilled in him the value of honesty, hard work, and helping others. It was these values that guided Raymond throughout his life, shaping him into a man everyone respected. From a young age, Raymond was no stranger to work. He started at the local mechanics shop when he was just 16, learning the trade from his father and the older men who took him under their wing. Over the years, he built a reputation for being reliable, trustworthy, and kind. If you had a problem with your car, you could bring it to Raymond, and not only would he fix it, but he'd do it with a smile, always making sure to check in on how you were doing. But Raymond wasn't just a man of work. He had a soft spot for creativity. While his hands were often covered in grease, his mind was always drawn to the arts. He admired artists, musicians, and dreamers. Although Raymond wasn't an artist himself, he had a deep respect for people who dared to create. He believed that creativity was essential to the human spirit, and he quietly supported local artists, attending their shows, buying their work, and encouraging their dreams. By the time Raymond was in his 50s, he had saved enough money to open his own auto repair shop. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. He built it from the ground up, with sweat and long hours, working 6 days a week to ensure its success. His shop became a staple in the community, and Raymond was known not only for his skill, but for the way he treated people. He gave fair prices, often cutting a deal for those who couldn't afford the repairs. He had a soft heart, and sometimes people would take advantage of his kindness, but Raymond never minded. "Better to be too kind than too hard," he would often say. As Raymond grew older, his success allowed him to start thinking about his legacy. He had built a life that he was proud of, but he didn't have children of his own. Instead, he poured his energy into helping the younger generation. He began mentoring local kids, teaching them not just about mechanics, but about life. He taught them that hard work, integrity, and kindness were the keys to a fulfilling life. It was around this time that Raymond began to dream of creating something bigger. He envisioned an arts and trades center for the town, a place where young people could learn skills like mechanics, woodworking, painting, and music. It would be a haven for creativity and craftsmanship, a place where the old and young could come together and share their knowledge. It was his way of giving back to the community that had supported him for so long. One day, Raymond met Samuel, a younger man who had recently moved to town. Samuel was charismatic, full of big ideas, and passionate about art and community, just like Raymond. They met at a local art gallery, and Raymond found himself drawn to Samuel's energy. Samuel spoke of starting an online platform that would connect small towns like theirs to the broader art world. It was an idea that lit a spark in Raymond. The thought of helping his community's artists and tradespeople reach a global audience was something he hadn't considered before. Samuel was enthusiastic and seemed genuine. He spoke at length about how the platform would work, how it would elevate local artists and craftsmen, and how it would give Raymond's dream of an arts and trades center the exposure it needed. Samuel shared Raymond's vision of supporting creativity, and for Raymond, it felt like he had finally found the person who could help bring his dreams to life. They spent months talking about the project. Samuel showed Raymond business plans, potential investor contacts, and even mock-ups of the platform's website. It all looked promising. Samuel wasn't just pitching an idea. He was painting a picture of what the future could look like. And Raymond couldn't help but believe in it. For the first time in years, Raymond felt excited about the possibilities ahead. He had been cautious with his money his entire life. But this felt different. It wasn't just an investment. It was a chance to leave behind something truly meaningful. So, despite his usual careful nature, Raymond decided to invest a significant portion of his savings into Samuel's project. At first, everything seemed to be progressing smoothly. Samuel kept Raymond updated, showing him incremental progress and telling him about meetings with potential investors. Raymond felt good about his decision, like his hard work was finally paying off in a way that would benefit future generations. But then, things started to change. Samuel became harder to reach. Weeks would go by without an update, and when Raymond called, he was met with excuses about how busy things were or how deals were still being negotiated. Samuel assured Raymond that everything was fine, but the more time passed, the more uneasy Raymond felt. It wasn't until one day, when Raymond tried to log into the online platform Samuel had shown him, that he realized something was very wrong. The website was gone. Completely vanished. Raymond tried calling Samuel, but his phone was disconnected. Emails bounced back. Panic set in as Raymond realized the truth. Samuel had disappeared, taking Raymond's money with him. Raymond had been scammed. The shock hit him hard. It wasn't just the financial loss, though that alone was devastating. It was the betrayal. For a man who had built his entire life on trust, honesty, and integrity, this felt like a deep wound. How could he have been so foolish? How could someone he trusted so completely, someone who shared his vision for the community, have deceived him like this? Word spread quickly through town. People whispered about Raymond's loss, wondering how someone so smart, so experienced, could have fallen for a scam. Some were sympathetic, but others saw it as a lesson, one that Raymond should have known better than to ignore. His friends tried to comfort him, but Raymond could see the doubt in their eyes. It wasn't just his money that was gone. It was the trust people had in him, in his judgment. His plans for the Arts and Trades Center fell apart. Without the funds he had invested, there was no way to move forward. His dream, once so close to becoming a reality, crumbled before his eyes. The worst part for Raymond wasn't the financial hit, though that was painful enough. It was the shift in how he saw the world. A man who had spent his entire life believing in the goodness of people now felt cynical, wary of anyone who approached him with a smile or a new idea. His outlook on life changed. Where he once saw potential and hope, he now saw risk and the possibility of betrayal. His future plans were shattered, and with them, the light in Raymond's heart dimmed. He became more withdrawn, less involved in the community he had once loved so much. The betrayal had taken more than just his money. It had taken his belief in the goodness of people. Months passed, and Raymond found himself at a crossroads. He could either let this experience define the rest of his life, or he could try to rebuild. It wasn't easy. The financial loss was significant, but it was the emotional toll that weighed most heavily on him. He couldn't help but replay every conversation with Samuel in his mind, wondering how he had missed the warning signs. But Raymond was nothing if not resilient. Slowly, he began to piece his life back together. He started by reaching out to the people who had always supported him, the local artists, the young tradespeople he had mentored. They rallied around him, reminding him of the good he had done for so many years. Though the dream of the Arts and Trade Center was gone, Raymond found solace in smaller ways. He began teaching again, offering free classes at his shop to anyone who wanted to learn. He may not have built the center he envisioned, but he still had knowledge to share, still had something to give. And through that giving, Raymond began to heal. He would never be the same man he was before the scam. The experience had changed him, made him more cautious, more guarded. But it also reminded him of the strength that had carried him through life, his work ethic, his kindness, and his resilience. He had been knocked down, but he wasn't out, and though his trust in people had been shaken, it wasn't completely gone. Raymond's legacy, in the end, wouldn't be a grand arts center. It would be the lives he touched, the skills he passed on, and the kindness he showed, even when it wasn't returned. Raymond's story is a reminder that success isn't just about money or fame. It's about the way you live your life, the people you help along the way, and the resilience you show when life knocks you down. Raymond's hard work and kind heart carried him through life. But even the most trusting and good-hearted people can be taken advantage of. His future plans may have been derailed, but in the end he found a way to continue his legacy. Not through grand gestures, but through the quiet, steady work of helping others. In the end, Raymond learned that while trust can be broken, it can also be rebuilt, slowly, cautiously, but with purpose. And that is where real success lies.